All right, welcome back into the podcast. I am very excited to do this. I've known this man here for probably about 15, 16 years now, producing radio shows that he was a part of. And now he is nice enough as he has his ride off into the sunset, his retirement. The great Peter King, longtime Sports Illustrated, and then, of course, NBC. He joins me now. Peter, Bill Zimmerman, how you doing?
Bill, I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Very, very excited to have you on here. And, just first wanted to talk a little bit about your career and Monday Morning Quarterback and moving on to NBC and everything you did there. And I guess first question, when you were putting together those Monday columns, and I know talking to you over the years, you always talked about how you were on no sleep. How much effort, phone calls, watching games, how much time was put into that column every week?
Well, what usually happened is that a lot of that column was not necessarily Sunday deadline stuff. Probably half of the column was stuff that happened either before Sunday, or I used to write about things that happened in the world that I could get done on Friday and Saturday. So my average column this past season was probably 10,500 words long. So I could do a good 5,500 words before the games even kicked off on Sunday. And so I worked most of the day Friday and then all day Saturday. And so I had a good 55% of the column written before the first ball was kicked off on Sunday. And then, basically what happens on Sunday is that you are controlled. The column is dictated by the events of the day. So then I would just, work. It would be a fire drill from about 9 o'clock at night after I'd get on the phone with a lot of people after the 1 o'clock and 4:30 games on the East Coast, and eat dinner. And then it was just a sprint to the finish starting at about 9 o'clock. And look, I'm the only person in America who rooted for a crummy game on Sunday night, because if it was a great game, sometimes I'd have to rip up my column. I'd have to write about that, whatever happened on Sunday night. That happened 2 or 3 times every year. But anyway, that's pretty much how the sausage was made.
All right. Well, when you were first starting out and cutting your teeth at the NFL level, I know you started in Cincinnati and did a couple things before you got that national platform. Was there a particular story you had or a particular person that really led to that first big opportunity?
Bill, I think it's Lawrence Taylor. I was working for Newsday in New York, and I broke the story of Lawrence Taylor getting suspended for violating the NFL's drug policy in 1988. And the managing editor, and look, managing editor of Sports Illustrated at the time was a guy named Mark Mulvoy. And Mark obviously read that story. He read other things that I did at Newsday covering the Giants and covering the NFL. And I think that really, more than anything else, is what led to the break that landed me at SI in 1989.
Well, let me ask you about SI, and I'll combine this. My first job, I was actually with Sporting News and then Sporting News Radio. Yeah. The box scores with Sporting News and everything was always such a big deal, and Sports Illustrated was such a staple. I mean, you waited to see who was on the cover and whether it was what you were writing or Rick Riley. I mean, there were just columnists and people Dr. Z, the columnists you wanted to read. And I know change is inevitable. But what is it like for you to see, Sports Illustrated struggling the way it is, Sporting News just not even being a thing anymore, practically just barely being an online publication, just the these monster publications that are just, it's completely pivoted away from them now.
Yeah, I was a correspondent for Sporting News for a period of time when I covered the Giants, and then obviously working at SI. it's all of it is sad, but it just, Bill, when I talk to journalism students now, and I've said the same thing for the last 15 years, you better diversify. When I was growing up, I wanted to write for a newspaper. I was a Woodward Bernstein kid. So I had no idea if I'd write sports or what I would write. Whatever I did was going to be exciting to me, whether I wrote sports, whether I covered the State House somewhere, it was going to be great. But I have learned since 1979, when I graduated from Ohio University, that's 45 years ago, I guess now. But what I've learned mostly is that if you don't get ready to do a wide variety of things, you're going to be a dinosaur in this business. You can't just say, I want to work on ESPN and I want to work on TV. I mean, it doesn't work that way anymore, except in the very, very, very scattered instances that people get a job in television and 30 years later, they're still doing the same thing. So, what I tell kids is, hey, learn how to do a podcast, learn how to write a blog, learn how to be the authority on something, and distribute your information, your knowledge in various places through a variety of ways to do it. So not only in the media, regular mass media, but in social media now. So that is really and that's what happened to SI. SI failed to keep current with all the, they didn't stay edgy, with all of the trends in the way journalism was going and sports journalism. So, I mean, I'm sad about it. Of course, SI is the biggest reason far and away why I got to where I got to in this sort of sports media world. But it just shows you that nothing lasts forever, and you better be willing to change and to be flexible.
Absolutely. And, obviously I could talk media with you forever, but I want to get into some football with you as well. So let me ask you this one, just kind of a general question here about kickoffs with this big change, how kickoff formats are going to work, and right. Obviously tapping into what the XFL had previously done. What was your kind of initial reaction when you hear that the massive change to the kickoff format?
Well, the way the NFL is going, and they are bound and determined to reduce drastically the number of concussions that are suffered in the course of an NFL season by players. It was either honestly going to be absolutely revolutionizing the kickoff as a play, or eliminating the kickoff altogether, which still may happen, and just giving the ball to a team on the 25-yard line to start every drive. And as I say, that still might happen. We'll see if this is a debacle or if it works. I don't think anybody knows exactly what's going to happen to it, but the NFL is always, from here on out, going to err on the side of being of player safety. And people will hear that and they'll say, "Oh, it's a bunch of bunk." Well, look, it isn't just about the players who play the game today. It's about saying to every mother and every family in the United States, you can aspire to be a player in the NFL, and it's not going to ruin your life, and it's not going to give you such significant brain trauma that by the time you're 55 years old, you're headed into early Alzheimer's. So, and again, look, that's never going to be totally eliminated, but the NFL is very concerned with the pool of talent in the long-term future, and as it should be. The league should be concerned with it. So this is just another attempt to try to make sure that they are showing people that they're going to do everything in its power to make the game as safe as it can be.
Well, let me ask you a couple things about Chicago Bears past and present. And I will use the new kickoff about the current Pro Football Hall of Fame class that I know you're involved in as a voter. And let me ask you about Devin Hester, because I think Bears fans obviously excited for Steve McMichael, excited for Julius Peppers, but Devin Hester was one that they, fans really wanted to see get into the Hall of Fame. And I'm curious about your opinion on specialists. And have you always been on board specialists, or, I know that we had a couple kickers in, then Ray Guy finally got in. Now you see a returner with Hester. Has your thought process evolved on specialists, or have you always thought they were underrepresented?
I've always thought they were underrepresented. I think Steve Tasker has gotten jobbed, should be in the Hall of Fame. I think Matthew Slater should be a very solid candidate as well, although in my opinion, Steve Tasker was more of an impact player on special teams, and Matthew Slater had a longer career, no question about it. But I think Tasker made more plays that, determine the outcome of games than Slater did. Having said all that, look, I think that Adam Vinatieri is an easy call for the Hall of Fame. I think probably one day Justin Tucker, will go in. I have been a proponent that, if you dominate the game, and I mean, I think I get in arguments with Raiders fans a lot, but I think Shane Leckler had a better career than Ray Guy did in there. Now, you can't compare numbers exactly, but I think Shane Leckler was better as a punter than Ray Guy was. Not a lot of people agree with me on that, but so I do think that more specialists should get in. And as far as Hester goes, look, anybody who is the best, people would agree that he's the best that there ever was returning kicks. And if you're the best ever at a big part of the game, to me, I think you ought to be in the Hall of Fame. And as I've said to people, I said, listen, Desmond Howard was a really good return man, was the MVP of a Super Bowl, for crying out loud, and was a great return man in his own right. And in his first 2 years in the NFL, Devin Hester had more touchdowns returning kicks than Desmond Howard had in his career. So I think that says a lot about where we are and why, in my opinion, Devin Hester I voted for him. It was a pretty easy choice as far as I'm concerned.
And let me ask you, I guess it's almost an obligatory question when we're talking Bears and over your lifetime, the 1985 team, is that, I know, and I don't think it really, I used to get in this argument with people about how it would translate in the modern game. And obviously with the way they've changed, the way you can go after quarterbacks and stuff, it doesn't work anymore. And I get that. But for you, where does that team, within its era, rank for you in terms of just single season greatness?
It's hard to imagine that there has been a team that was more dominant than that Bears team was. And it probably would have been considered on a par with any team that ever played if Dan Marino and the Miami Dolphins didn't beat them by 2 touchdowns on that December Monday night that year. But if you look at that Bears team, early in the year, they were a good defensive team. But as the year went on, they were one of the greatest defensive teams of all time. 2 shutouts in the playoffs, including the memorable Sean Landeta whiff game on that Sunday afternoon in January of 86. I was in the stadium that day because I was covering the Giants, and that was a bruising, shocking game to me to see how much Chicago just dominated the Giants. And then obviously, when you, and my math is probably going to be wrong on this, Bill, but, has there ever been a team that was more dominating in the playoffs than that Bears team beating 3 teams by a score of, I think it was 91-10.
91-10. And that touchdown came late in the Super Bowl.
Yeah. And, they shut out the Giants, shut out the Rams. Look, that was an incredible team. But Bill, I probably think about it a little bit differently than maybe many Bear fans. I think more about what could have been and what should have been. What could have been if Mike Ditka and Buddy Ryan weren't at war? What could have been if Jim McMahon had, sort of stayed upright for the long term and had a long career as a quarterback instead of, didn't it always seem like there was something with him?
Sure.
That he was, and look, he was a tough guy. But I mean, over the course of his career, and I don't know the exact numbers, but over the course of his career, I believe I'm right in saying this, that Jim McMahon never played a 16-game season.
I think that's correct, yeah.
And
I don't think he was close.
Yeah, and what's amazing about that when you think about it is that we all thought at the time, think back to 85, he missed some games that year, obviously, but we think back to that time and we thought, my God, that guy was a Pro Bowl, really good quarterback. And he wasn't the best quarterback in football. And the numbers looking at him now are very pedestrian. The amazing thing about Jim McMahon, I was looking this up because I saw him this year at the Super Bowl. And the amazing thing about Jim McMahon is that his career high for touchdown passes in a season was 15. I mean, that's amazing to me. Do you realize Jim McMahon in his career threw 100 touchdown passes? And you don't think of that. It's crazy to think of it. I mean, Peyton Manning, you'd probably come up with 5 3-year periods where he was over 100 touchdown passes in 3 years.
Right.
So, look, but that was a really, really good defensive team, one of the top 5 of all time, easy. But I think they were really reined in by the rivalry between Ditka and Ryan and the fact that they were just a pretty pedestrian offense.
All right, well, let me wrap up with the current Chicago Bears and the Caleb Williams situation that a lot of Bears fans are excited about. And, we don't need to dive into your final column where you said the winds were blowing one direction. The storm you created in Chicago when I texted you and you're just like, hey, man, I'm just making a guess here. But, the Bears obviously have not had success developing quarterbacks. And a lot of times you can look at what the organization did. And that's definitely something they're trying to change here. So let me just wrap up with this with Caleb Williams. What do you think over your time as an NFL writer and reporter is the most important thing to develop a rookie quarterback and bring them from the college into a successful pro career?
Don't rush him. And you could find out when he shows up, the stories of Brock Purdy early on at the San Francisco 49ers. One of the reasons that Kyle Shanahan, who didn't know much about him when he was drafted because they didn't think necessarily they were going to draft him. But one of the things early on that Kyle Shanahan absolutely fell in love with, a trait, is that he would play scout team against one of the best defenses in football. And he would jabber at Fred Warner all the time. And he would win a lot of the battles in training camp in his first year in 2022. And he would win these battles against this great defense. And he wasn't shying away from anything. And so I think be patient. Don't force a guy into a game before you really believe he's ready, because that can have an adverse effect over the long haul. And to me, look, Caleb Williams is obviously a fantastic prospect. But Bill, if you go back and look at the Caleb Williams tape in the game against Notre Dame, where Notre Dame rushed the passer just great that day, and Caleb Williams couldn't get anything done, that's one of the reasons why I thought hang on to Fields and build around him with a bunch of draft choices over the next 2 years and build a great offensive line. Now, their offensive line is okay now, but I wouldn't say it's great. So if your offensive line, is getting the quarterback beat up, then don't rush Caleb Williams in there. So those are a couple of ways that I would look at it.
All right, well, there he is, Peter King, the legendary NFL writer, broadcaster. You know him very well. Peter, really enjoyed this conversation. Thanks so much. I don't want to keep you any longer. I know you're busy. Thanks again, and have a great retirement.
Bill, that's great. Thanks a lot for having me, and good luck to you.